Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Talking Country with Brad and Chancey. Man, it's a beautiful day today in Texas.
Good morning, Brad. Yes, it is. We had some pretty sloppy last few days, but today's going to maybe dry out a little bit. Well, we didn't get that much rain, but it's going to be a nice, pretty day today.
We got a good 3/10. We put our fertilizer on our wheat a couple weeks ago. That wasn't cheap to do. But, man, we got it out there. We got the perfect rain on it. Everything's starting to green up a little bit today. Boy, I tell you what, it's getting to be that time of the year.
Yes, hopefully we get some more rains, too, because we're dry right now. I mean, we don't have any deep soil moisture. We're just kind of getting those little rains kind of green things up. But we're going to need some deep soil moisture rains here pretty soon.
I think we're supposed to be in the 80s by the end of the week here, so it's not going to take long to dry out that little bit of a shower we got. But maybe, just maybe, it'll stay dry enough for us to get our corn planted.
Yeah.
All the grain markets are going crazy right now with all the stuff going on overseas. Oil markets are going crazy right now.
Sure.
A lot of
through the roof.
Yes, a lot of uncertainty right now in the world as to what's going to happen next. One thing we do have to be doing in order to support all this is paying our taxes.
Yes, we do. Tax season is coming around real soon, actually.
It is indeed. And so today we're going to talk to you a little bit about ag exemptions that you could get on your property, which nowadays is becoming more and more important. A lot of inflation going on right now with property values, especially in our area of Central Texas. A lot of people paying a lot of money for property. And if you lose your ag exemption, you're going to be into some money.
Yes, absolutely. And as Brad was saying, so many people are moving in here, and like a lot of them are not necessarily making money or trying to use their land to make a living like so much of our ancestors did. They're doing it and they're using it for recreation, for hunting or different purposes. And in Texas specifically, we always call it an ag exemption or a wildlife exemption, but that's really kind of a bad term for it. It's actually a ag appraisal or a wildlife appraisal. And so what that means, like open space lands that had been traditionally farmed or ranched or whatever means it was, if they were just open spaces, well, they are taxed. They have a special valuation. They're taxed on not the market value of the land. They're taxed on the productivity of the land.
You still have a market appraisal, but you also have an ag appraisal of how much that land produced, how much you think you could have profited off of that and still afford the taxes on it.
Yes. So, yeah, you still got your market value, but then you've got your wildlife or your ag valuation, and there always is a lot of difference between those two. And what it's trying to do is keep stuff in open space, like we say. Our ag lands in Texas are the most important. they produce our food, our fiber. They're everything. Help clean our water. Help her clean our air. So we don't want everything in concrete, but at the same time, so many of our producers out there, for lack of a better word, are land rich and money poor. And this allows them, because if they had to pay taxes based on their market value, they'd go right out of business. It's just that simple.
Oh, absolutely. If you've ever looked at that.
Unless you're a millionaire or, have a lot of money.
If you've looked at that value, it's pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
It would take a good part of your salary to pay your taxes on 100, even on 10 acres now.
Oh, yeah. Most people couldn't afford it.
No, absolutely. And so luckily there is this option of this ag, and now even starting, I guess, in 1995,
yes,
you could actually put your place into a wildlife exemption, which is a subcategory of this ag exemption.
Yes, yeah. So like as Bradley saying, so for years we'd always had this ag use, or ag appraisal. And then also that applies to timberlands too. Like if you're, in east of here, you've got pine trees or whatever. So you're basically trying to make money with your land. Well, in 1995, I think in Texas specifically, we started getting a lot of interest in white-tailed deer in the mid-90s, and wildlife management started really kind of gearing up and taking off. Landowners were starting to think about it a lot. Well, the legislature in 1995, a bill originated in the House of Representatives, and that bill was called House Bill 1358. And it called an amendment to the Texas Constitution that added wildlife management to the list of qualifying agricultural practices.
This is in 1995.
That was in 1995. So it's not like people call it a wildlife exemption, but it's actually a category. You still got your open space 1D1 ag appraisal, and this is just category underneath. Like you could get an ag appraisal for beekeeping or for vineyards, winemaking, stuff like that, running cattle, cutting hay. a paragraph, a page long of all the different things that, fall under ag use.
And so add this ag exemption to that page-long list of all the great things that came in the 90s, too. What a time to be alive.
Yes.
Yeah, now you get a tax break for raising deer on your place,
Yeah, for human use, or something like that, as long as you manage for them. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that, how it applies specifically for Texas and then kind of specifically for our region. But most of the time when a landowner changes from like a more traditional agricultural use, such as cattle production, to wildlife management ag use, the landowner must make an application to the appraisal district. Basically, go make an application to the chief appraiser at the CAD between January 1st and April 30th of the year in which the owner wants to implement the change. So basically, if you're thinking about moving from ag to wildlife this year, you've got between January 1st and April 31st to make that application to the CAD. You got to let them know that you're thinking about making this change.
Almost how much time you have to get your taxes done.
Pretty much. So that's kind of the way I think about it too, And so they give you till April 30th to have it done. And that's also if you've had wildlife exemption, or I keep saying exemption, but like I said, it's a wildlife valuation on your land, then you have an annual report, and it's always due by April 30th as well. So, and just while I mentioned that, if you decided for some reason you wanted to go out of wildlife and go back into ag use, you can, but you still have to let the chief appraiser know. You got to let the county appraisal district know in the same time frame between January, because you're changing use. You're basically changing use from wildlife to ag, or from ag to wildlife. You can interchange, but you need to let them know during that time period.
So any kind of changes to what you want to do with your property, you have to let the appraisal district know, I guess, huh?
Well, if you're changing use. Mm-hmm. So say if you're going from ag to wildlife, yes. Or if you're in wildlife, it's like, you know what, I'm going to go back to ag use.
And all of this happens at your county appraisal office?
Yes, you let them know. There's an application. If you've ever applied for ag use, you remember. You went down to the ag appraisal. They gave you a 1D1 open space. If you've never had a wildlife or an ag valuation, that's the thing, y'all. You can't just go in and apply for wildlife. You have to have ag use first. Once you have ag use, then you can change it over to wildlife. But you can't just go in there, clean slate, and go to wildlife. You have to get ag first.
If you have an ag valuation on your place, they come out every year and they send an appraiser out and they look at your property and see if you've built anything, if you've changed anything.
Yeah, usually in January, the county appraisal districts drive around, see if you're maintaining your fences, I guess, running cattle, cutting hay, whatever you say that you do.
And if they notice that, hey, by chance, you haven't baled any hay, the grass is getting old, it's all growing
Fences
up in mesquites,
down.
It's growing up in trees, doesn't look like that Brad's doing anything he's not producing any kind of agriculture stuff on this property. We need to kind of send him a letter saying, hey, you're about to lose this ag valuation that I have on it. Likewise, you could put it in this wildlife, but there's these different requirements that you have to have in order for it to fall into wildlife too. You can't just say, okay, yeah, I'm not farming that anymore. I know it's covered in mesquites, but I'm doing that for the deer.
Yes.
You got to let the appraisal district know that, hey, that's what I'm doing out here. You're going to fill out the paperwork, and then you got to, and you're going to have to meet these 4 requirements in order for it to work, fall underneath that program, I guess I would say.
Yeah. So like, say that scenario happens and the landowner says, well, you know what? I don't have the money. I'm getting too old. Whatever reason.
My tractor broke down. My cow died.
Yeah, I'm tired of fighting floods and keep washing the fence out. For whatever reason, it's just not. And that's another thing too. You don't have to put your whole property into wildlife. You can take a parcel or a piece or a certain amount of acreage, as long as you put it on the map and let them know. So if that's something that you want to do, what you would do between January 1st and April 30th, you would go to the appraisal district and you would apply for a change in land use. Now, the 4 requirements that chief appraiser is going to look at, number 1, to see if you even qualify to go to wildlife, there's 4 things that she's going to look at or he's going to look at. And the first one is going to be that property, it must have been qualified and appraised as open space land in the year prior to conversion.
It had to have an ag valuation.
It had to have ag last year. Mm-hmm. Had to. If it didn't have it last year, then you can't just go right into it. It had to be the previous year.
And so a lot of people get in trouble with some of that stuff buying these subdivided places, huh?
Well, yeah, because there's also a minimum requirement, stuff like that. And now the state has made, and we'll get into that. But before we get in there, let's just finish these other 3. So number 1 had to be in ag the previous year, the year before. Number 2, you're going to have to actively manage and sustain a breeding, migrating population of native animals, and that's key, native. I think the exact wording is indigenous or something. That just means native. Like, you can't have a wildlife exemption and manage exotic deer. It has to be native animals, native deer, native songbirds, native butterflies, whatever.
Bees.
Well, but that would be a ag exemption.
Oh, that's true.
Valuation.
That goes away
Bees
from the
technically
wildlife.
a type of livestock.
That's true.
Because you farm them just like cattle. You milk them. Or like, not milk them, but think of their honey as milk,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
they're producing something.
They're producing something that we
a
in turn
product.
sell. So, it's no different than a farmer out there raising a beef producer out there raising it to eat, or a milk cow producer out there raising it for milk.
Sure.
Bees, the same thing. The third requirement would be that it has to be managed for human use. Basically, human need to get something out of it.
And this is a blanket term there. I mean, if you can't check that, check in the box, you got problems.
The chief appraiser is going to look, well, of course it's for human use, because he's either going to hunt it, or he's going to bird watch with it, or he's going to let the grandkids go out there, or he's going to fish on it, whatever. Human use is very easy. That's a very easy requirement to fulfill.
Okay.
But it's also, I guess, more important if, like, an absentee landowner buys a piece of property that he doesn't go out to all the time. He just doesn't see it all the time. He only goes out there, 2 or 3 times a year or once a month or something. You got to just prove that you're using this wildlife, that you're managing for your own use or somebody else's use.
It can't be like a 100-acre place that I buy as an investment somewhere. It's like, say I'm living in a whole nother state, and then all of a sudden this property is just sitting there, and I'm saying it's wildlife, but in all actuality, like, nobody's been on the place in 10 years. Well, that could be where that could be a problem, I guess, that. Maybe.
And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, like people that want to develop or something is going to sit on it, but they need to be showing that during that time they're actively hunting it, or they're leasing the land for other people, or their grandkids are going out there. They're using that land. It's just not sitting there as an investment property that they do nothing with.
Sure, makes sense.
The fourth requirement that you've got to have a wildlife management plan.
And that's a big one.
Yeah, this is a big one, because most CADs, they want you, when you apply for your application, most of the ones I've dealt with, they want you to turn in.
And by CAD, Chancey means?
County Appraisal District.
Okay.
So, like, this one's called Milam CAD, or Lee CAD. I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm talking about the appraisal district. So most of the time when you apply for that turnover to change, they want you to have your wildlife management plan with you. And Texas Parks and Wildlife has a form that you can go online, print out, fill out. And the thing with the wildlife management plan, you, the landowner, can set your goals, and you can write the wildlife management plan. Or, the state of Texas has a biologist for every county. I can't think of the name for the one in Milam County right now. It used to be Tim Sigmund, who I used to work with all the time, but I think his name's Mr. Alcorn. But anyway, every county, state in the state has their own wildlife biologist, and you can contact them, and they will write you one for free of charge. They'll help you and help you with your land, help you with everything if they have time.
That's the kicker
busy
right now.
Most of the state biologists I know, and I used to be one, they got their head up. They're struggling. They're struggling to keep their head above water. They really are.
Yes, as so much property is changing hands in the state of Texas, and not many of them want to farm.
Yes,
who are buying the property or ranch. So looking for wildlife exemptions and stuff, they got to go to the guy, and you hope that you're not too late on that, because they're pretty backlogged.
Because by this time, if you're going to a state guy, I'm not saying, but if you're going to a state biologist right now at this time of year, they probably got 20 people ahead of you. So it's one of those things that you need to be thinking about, or not years in advance, but be thinking about prior to just switching over. Because if you don't write it yourself, you're going to have to get somebody to write it, because you have to have one. But like I said, you can write them yourself. And, I know lots of landowners that are master naturalists or whatever, just good outdoor people that do their research, and they know their stuff, and they can Google search and find academia papers and watch, and, you could put one together, actually. But if you don't have time, there's also private individuals that will write you a plan as well.
Well, speaking of that, Chancey is one of those guys, and he has a website. It's nativetxwildlife.com. Okay, so once again, that's native and then TX for Texas, nativetxwildlife.com, where you could get his contact information and see some of the work he's done. He's got pictures and everything of all the work that he's done over time, and he could definitely help you write these different management plans so that you could qualify for this wildlife valuation on your property.
Yes, and well, thank you, Brad, and that is true. It's something I could certainly help out with, but at the same time, y'all don't Forget about your state biologist too. I know money's tight for everybody else, and I just have to mention there's competition out there. There's other people, and I mean a lot of these guys are my friends. I went to school with them. I know them. So Plateau Land and Wildlife is another one in the Hill Country that does that. I think Landmark is another one that does it as well. So there's opportunities out there if you get, because I tell you at this time of year everybody gets busy. And so there's options, and you don't want, the thing about it is, I'm talking to you landowners out there, you don't want to lose it. If you lose it, it's a nightmare, and it's a pain to get back. So whatever you do, if you can't get the state biologist to do it and save you some money and got to pay someone, whatever you do, you don't want to lose your ag exemption.
And while we're on the topic, if you do, even your ag valuation that you have for farming and ranching, if you lose that, it's going to take you 7 years in order to get that thing back. You're going to pay full property taxes for 7 years until you
5 for sure.
Yeah, because you got to show five out of 7 years
mm-hmm.
that you've done something to manage your agricultural use on that property.
So the way this works, y'all, is what Bradley was just saying. Say you lost it. Okay, now guess what? You lost it. Well, you've got to go back to the appraisal district between January 1st and April 30th and apply for open space. And then you have to, I think, if I haven't done just straight ag, and I think you have to apply. You apply that first year, but then you have to go by every year and say it. And then after you've done it for 5 years, then the appraisal district looks at it and says, okay, well, yeah, you grazed it properly, you cut hay properly, you did whatever properly. Yes, we'll approve you for ag use, open space ag use. That means you just paid property taxes at market value.
For 5 years.
For 5 years, which that's a lot of money, y'all.
And
don't lose it.
If you buy a property that's probably that had an ag valuation, but it's been for sale for a couple years and nothing's been done with it,
mm-hmm.
you're probably already 2 years behind the game, maybe.
You could be, because that's another thing too. So much of what's going on, we're subdividing these bigger chunks of land and subdividing them, and that's one of the things. Like too, it's not a requirement when we talk about minimum acreages. If it changes a little bit when you start subdividing land per county, per area. Well, basically not per county, but per ecoregion. So the state's been divided into like different ecoregions for the property tax concerns, like Blackland Prairie, Post Oak Savannah, Eastern Hill Country, or Edwards Plateau, that kind of stuff.
Here's where we need to mention how many acres you even have to have for that.
Well, that's the thing, too.
For this, while we're on this topic of requirements.
If you're in ag use already and the property has not been subdivided, there is no minimum acreage.
But how many minimum acres is it to get an ag valuation, period?
Well, I think it changes per county, but say Milam County and even like counties around here, most of them is around 5 to 6. If you start getting less than 5 or 6 acres, even 7, they're going to start. I'm not going to say that you can't do it with cattle, but they're going to start really looking at you. They're going to be like, okay, you got 5 acres and you ag use. They're going to be looking at. So that's where a lot of people in those smaller type acreages, like from 5 to 20, they'll go bees. They'll go, an ag use in bees versus cattle or hay. But I know a lot of the counties I deal with, 5 is a good general rule, 5. So you had 5 acres in your ag, then you're grandfathered in. If the property hadn't been subdivided, it's been ag use for 20 years. Grandpa had it in there, you had it, and now whatever, you can go right to wildlife. There's no problem. The kicker is if you have a piece of property that's been subdivided the previous year, the year before, then there's a minimum acreage. And that minimum acreage is based on a formula that state legislature puts out, and basically the county appraisal review board, who is I don't think they're elected, that they may be appointed or something, but the chief appraiser answers to the appraisal review board, and they set a percentage, and the state legislature said that percentage has to be between 92 and 94% of that use, something like that. And in Milam County,
for wildlife.
Well, yeah, for the minimum acreage for wildlife, yeah. So when you do that in Milam County and Lee County, anywhere in the Post Oak Savannah and anywhere in the Blackland Prairie, that minimum acreage is 16.6. And the way that formula is, you just take the acreage that you start with, subtract 1, and then divide it back by the acreage you started with, and that percentage, as long as it's 94%, that's how you get. And for our area, it's 94%, which gives us 16.6 acres. If you go west of here, it's 20 acres, but it's 95%. They want it 95%. And that's for wildlife. That's to convert. If the property has been subdivided the previous year. I know that's confusing, so just say you brought a piece of property and it was subdivided and you bought the little parcel. If it's 10 acres, you can't put it into wildlife.
Ever?
No, not ever. No. You can put it, but not that year. It only applies to that first year. So if you would have to put it into ag or try to keep it in ag. If you bought it as 10 acres, you got it ag exempt. Do whatever you can on your 10 acres or 5 acres or whatever to keep it in ag. Yeah, whatever you can, whether it be that bees or whatever. And then once it's in ag, then technically the next year, then you could put it in wildlife. But it's just that first year, as far as I'm aware of.
But don't you have to have 16 acres to be in wildlife?
Only that first year if it's got subdivided before. Like I said, if grandfathered in, if it hadn't been subdivided.
Okay, it doesn't matter if it's
year. Only subdivided the previous year. So that's something that just needs to be clarified because it is confusing. It's only as far as I know, and I'm pretty certain on this, it applies statewide. That's not a county per county thing. That is a statewide thing. It just applies that the previous year of you purchasing it. So if it's less than 16.6 acres and you're in the Post Oak Savannah and the Blackland Prairie, then you need it to be, say it was 10 acres, then you need to put it in ag that year. Make sure you got it in ag. Keep it in ag for however long you want, but make sure you keep it in ag. And then you could, at a later date, move it into wildlife if you wanted to.
And I guess depending on how hurting your county is for road work or different kind of things like that, it does. Yes. They probably look at you a little harder
if you got small acreage. Yes,
yeah.
And if you got small acreage, they're going to look at you a little harder, and that's, and they should really. They need to make sure because it's a substantial tax valuation. It's a big difference.
Very substantial.
So,
yes.
And that's a lot of revenue that's not going to the schools or going to whatever. Your property taxes go to. I know school and then the county taxes and stuff, but that's a lot of chunk of money. And so as appraisal districts and counties get crunched for money, they probably start keeping a more closer eye on property exchanges and that. Well, I know they do.
And so once you actually meet these requirements and they say, okay, Chancey, I'll give you the wildlife exemption on this. Okay, you could have it, but there's 7 management practices that you're going to have to put a little check in the box beside. Well, how many? 3 out of these 7, I guess, that we're about to mention?
Every year. So the state, and this comes from the state, y'all, and Parks and Wildlife. So the state of Texas has put out together wildlife management practices that are applicable to every property. And in Texas in general, y'all, I hate to say, always or never, but in general, there's very, very little lands in Texas that don't require some form of management to keep them in some suitable state of wildlife production, depending on what your goals are for species.
Otherwise, it's just going to grow up.
It's going to get too thick, or it gets too rank. It gets too decadent. It needs usually about the only thing I can even think of that probably is self-sustaining is a very mature bottomland hardwood forest. Big old mature floodplain. That system it's at climax and it's kind of taking care of its own self, But other than that, and quite honestly, we probably have very, very little mature bottomland hardwood forest left in the county or in Blackland Prairie for sure. So the state's put 7 practices out there, and the requirement is that a landowner has to do 3 out of the 7 every year to qualify that they're using it for quote-unquote wildlife use.
So I'm guessing there's a form, and it's got these things on it.
Yes, there's a form.
Every year you fill this form out.
Yep, and if you've done it, it's on Parks and Wildlife template. It's a form, and you can get it from your county appraisal district or from Parks and Wildlife. It's a form. It's a checkbox, What you're doing, y'all, is you're trying to prove. We're not prove. You're justifying what you do. You're keeping track of your work, number one. And I tell all my landowners, look, especially the first year, get you a little envelope or get you a folder, put all your receipts in there. Keep documenting everything. Take pictures. I love pictures. And county appraisal districts love pictures. It's been my experience when I do one. They look at you pretty hard that first year. And then if you got all your ducks in a row, they're like, guy's taking care of business or gal. Yeah, we still require the annual report, but they're not, as long as you're documenting everything, it's usually not an issue.
And, you mentioned that, but so many people who come in and they go to talking about their property tax and having to go do go down to the appraisal district and argue with them over their tax appraisals or protested, I guess you call it.
Yeah, protested.
They always mention taking pictures in there. So
yes. One of the things that I do with mine, and I tell you the appraisal district I've given it to, they love it. And I do it with everything. I call it like a photo point map, and you go out, give them a little map with photo points of it. And those photo points, you can see where that map, and then you have an accompanying pages of photos there. Say, okay, here's photo point 1, and this is a picture of this area facing north. Here's a picture of this area facing south. Say you planted native grass or a food plot there. You can show it. Something like that goes a long ways, man. I mean, it really does.
It shows that you're doing something.
Shows that you're actively managing for a sustainable migrating wintering population of native animals. That's what you're trying to prove. And that's all they're wanting. They're wanting to make sure that you're doing what you say and what you're supposed to be doing by law. So out of those management practices, they can be broke down into, there's 7 of them. The first one's habitat management. Then there's
we've done a lot of talking on that particular topic.
Yeah, we've been talking about habitat management with everything we do.
Yeah, shredding, burning,
disking, all that would fall, and it could also be some of them providing supplemental foods, because that's a category. So out of the 7, you got habitat management, erosion management, predator management, provide supplemental water, provide supplemental food, provide supplemental shelter, and then conduct a census, which we talked. Part of that was a browse survey on one of them. So that's your 7. As long as you do 3 of them each year.
Per year.
Out of
each year
7.
You have to do 3 out of the 7.
Per year, yeah. Then you qualify, and all you do is document. Right now, every CAD's wanting to do annual reports, like you have to turn in the annual report, but they're overloaded too, y'all. The CADs are overloaded. They're getting more and more wildlife appraisal. I think people are going to wildlife exponentially. And so, there's only limited resources and limited manpower. So I know some counties have gone or starting to still do the annual report, because sometimes landowners just don't want a county official or a government official, state, local, fed, whatever, on their property. Some of them are going to look, if you don't want to do your annual reports, and I don't think Milam County is like this, but Washington County I know is like this. They're like, I don't want to do my annual reports, and neither does the county have time to deal with it. They're like, okay, well, we'll just come do a site visit once every 3 years. Do a site visit on your property. It takes 10, 15 minutes. Drive me around. Show me your 3 practices that you did out of the 7, and we're good.
And to be directly honest, the appraisal district's coming out to do an appraisal quite often anyway. So
they're out there every January looking anyway. They're driving around the county looking at your property.
So it's not really like it's anybody being too nosy. It's more what they're already doing.
And unless, you're like me, so much of my job is on a computer. So doing an annual report, so much of my job is a report and maps anyway. That's just what I do for a living. It's not a big deal for me to do one. But if I was out there, a producer that hates emailing and hates doing that kind of stuff, well, yeah, I can see an annual report would be a real pain. It'd be a lot easier. Yeah, meet me out there Monday morning.
To be honest, I would rather do that, but you better hope you have been checking all your boxes in the meantime, because
they're not just going to show up and knock on your door.
You got a new water trough sitting out there in the middle of the place to meet your water.
Yeah,
and you cut them.
How long's that been out there? It's kind of like, you always hear those chief appraisers saying, go out there and check it for cattle, and the cows all have Selborne tags, brand new on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you better be taking care, because I know that I would be this way. I'd be like, okay, I no longer have to do that yearly report, and then all of a sudden I'd look down at my watch and it's 3 years later, and I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I better go out there and show that 3 years ago I did something.
Yeah, and I don't think that's, like I said, they can't just come on your property. They're going to call you.
You got to choose this option. Yes.
Yeah, and you choose that option, and most of the time they're going to call you. Say, hey, what's a good time?
Yes, sir. 6 months from now, if that's okay. Sir, what's a good day to come out there and meet you? Let's see, what's today? Maybe next year. Yeah, but that probably you better stay on top of it if you choose.
Think about,
because I would definitely be that guy.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're managing for deer, most people are already doing probably all these 7 practices anyway. Really, you are. If you're a big deer hunter, you're already doing.
You're probably doing it, but are you keeping record of it?
That's the thing. Yes, are you keeping record of it? But one good thing is you can always drive to somebody and show them your supplemental feeding station, because supplemental feeding is one of them. And there's details of all these things, but as long as corn doesn't work, supplemental, you can't.
Oh, that's not considered a supplemental.
No, because it's really not. That's more of a bait. Supplemental feeding is to provide the nutrition that's adequate. So in general, supplemental feed, if you're going to do that as a mark off the box and you want to use pelleted feed, it has to be at least 16% crude protein.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. But you can get supplemental feed by planting a food plot or oats. But you can't have a corn feeder out there and just feed corn and check the box for supplemental feed that way.
So keep your receipts from when you buy the feed.
Yes, that. And then, depending on your goals, this is where it gets real back important to wildlife management plan. Your wildlife management plan outlines and details your goals, and your goals are specific to your passion as a landowner, what you want it to be. A lot of people could care less about a white-tailed deer. Some of them would much rather manage butterflies or manage, neotropical songbirds. And
Absolutely.
I don't blame them. I love birds and butterflies too. But some people don't care anything about the birds and butterflies, and they just want deer. So on your goals, it needs to be very specific.
Well, and it has to be something that's in your area too. Like,
Yes.
I mean, you can't have 10 acres in the middle of a field that somebody just subdivided for housing, and you're going to manage it for deer.
Yes, it's got to be.
Like, that's not going to work.
Too. Like, if you only got 5 acres, you can't say, well, I'm going to manage for a sustainable breeding population of deer. I mean, yeah, you can put them kind of on your list, but that's not your primary goal. You better look at other options. But whatever I'm saying, make it real specific, because if you're managing for winter birds or birds period habitat, you can do census doing winter bird surveys, counting the amounts of birds every day at your bird feeder and which species, keeping it logged. That's stuff that a lot of bird watchers do anyway. And that stuff will help for your that box. So number one, you're providing supplemental food, and you're doing a census. That's 2 of them right there that most landowners do anyway, that if they have a bird feeder.
That sounds very relaxing. I want to go put all my ag land in the wildlife right now and go count birds every day. Well, that just sounds so relaxing.
Early in the morning, man, have a bird feeder outside your window, man, and drink coffee and watch them. You'd be surprised what'll come in.
Sounds very enjoyable.
I enjoy it.
Let's elaborate on this, Chancey, before we get too scattered out here. Yeah. Habitat.
Yes, habitat management.
So what are some, like, we already beat it into the ground already before.
Just some bullet points of habitat management. So you got here's some things.
Okay, so if you're going to check your box off on your wildlife management valuation,
habitat management,
these are things you could do and record that will get you a check in the box for habitat management.
Yeah, grazing management, prescribed burning, range enhancement. That means you plant grasses, interseeding. Brush management, forest management, riparian management, improve. Riparian is just a fancy word for stream, y'all. Wetland improvements. If you got wetlands on your property, can you improve them? Habitat protection for species of concern. If you got threatened endangered species, or now in Texas, another thing's called SGCN species. These are called species of greatest conservation need. Just about everybody has some of these on their property. You start trying to provide habitat for them. Bam, check off your list. Wildlife restoration, not a whole lot of people have stuff like that. That would be like if you're reintroducing something. But some properties do, like if you got Houston toads or you're working with state. I mean, that's a check off the box for habitat management.
And, like one way that I have a neighbor who does this actually. He's got string draped up on poles where, and then he feeds the birds, and the birds land on the string, and then they poop out seeds and stuff, and what grows? Well, all the hackberry trees and the different things that these birds have been eating. So I guess that's one way to show that you've been working on your habitat. I mean, that's a check in the box for that.
Yeah, and that could also be, like I said, some of these there's overlap, y'all, between like providing supplemental cover and habitat management. Like you can provide supplemental cover by letting your fence line boundaries grow up, especially if you're managing for cottontail rabbits.
You could even manage for cottontail rabbits.
Native animals. As long as it's a native.
You just need a management plan for that.
For that animal. So what I like to do, especially like these areas, you manage for the species of native range.
That are there when you...
Ground squirrels, cottontail rabbits, all your neotropical songbirds that come through twice a year, all your winter migratory birds, your winter bird. Dick sissels are a big deal, in our neck of the woods right now. Dick sissels are just, man, they're just getting hammered right now. It's all...
What are they?
All of our grassland. Well, in the summertime, those little birds that you always see out in the Blackland Prairie, they're on power lines, they're on bloodweeds, they look like little field larks.
Yes.
It's called a dick sissel. They got a yellow breast. They migrate. Big-time migratory birds. And I think they're coming from Chile and Argentina, somewhere down in South America, where they're kind of like blackbirds down there. So the farmers down there cuss them and try to kill them all. But then up here, they're trying to nest. And what's happening to them? All of our prairie is getting converted to solar panels and getting converted to houses and everything else. And even though we've got cropland, most of those dick sissels are all breeding on, our cropland and our fields and our roads. And they're just doing really bad. All of our grassland songbirds, loggerhead shrikes, what we call butcher birds, they're just not doing well at all. Field larks, stuff like that.
So there's so many needs for this wildlife valuation. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to make a difference.
There really is, especially like for our birds, stuff that migrates. It's critical, man. I mean, those little areas. I mean, I was looking this morning when it got, or not this morning, when it got really cold and nasty. I had left a stand of native edge, little blue stem and everything, and there was a bunch of purple top tridents that had come up there. And that purple top trident, I never cut it down or shredded. I just left it for for cover for insects and birds, and also a food source. And I was watching, it was white-throated sparrows. They were I'd never seen them do it before. They were crawling up the stalk of that purple top tridents and eating the seeds off of that tridents from it. And I never watched them forage like that.
What a neat little ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, me being a bird guy, I enjoyed watching. I was like, well, look at right there. That's kind of critical because you think about these little sparrows are just like souped up magnum little micro chickens, They got to get on the ground and scratch around and find tiny seeds or, from native grasses and stuff. So
yeah, and so as you can imagine, the tax appraisers don't give Chancey too many questions on his wildlife management plan because he sounds like he's got it figured out there. We had that discussion a while ago even about like pesticide applicator licenses, which are becoming so important right now. I'm not saying I know everything by any means, but I mean, I've taken every class you could think of. I could draw the active molecule and half of the restricted chemical that you could buy, but yet I can't go buy it without a chemical applicator's license. Yeah. And I got to go get CEUs and listen to people who were trained by the same people I was trained by tell me what I already know in order to get a check in that box. So, you got guys like Chancey over here who know the ins and the outs of all of this that you need for wildlife. And once again, contact him at nativetexaswildlife.com and he could help you with all this stuff. So that's a little bit about habitat, but so there's these other checks in the boxes that we got to cover, and erosion would be the next one.
Erosion management.
Erosion management. Yeah, not erosion.
Well, a lot of people say erosion control, but, predator control, well, it depends on what you like to hear better. Erosion management, erosion control. Predator control, predator management,
It's just a
I feel good. What's like, everybody says I harvested a deer. Why don't you just say I killed it? I mean,
because in actuality, there's not much different. It sounds a lot better.
Yeah, I guess so. You harvest vegetables, kind of way I see it.
So we're gonna do erosion management.
Yeah. So one of those be pond construction. So you got a wash gully, you can build a pond. And the neat thing about those, like big ones, like pond construction, that's a check in the box for 10 years.
And Chance, if you think about it, you better be thinking twice as you're listening to this if you have 5 acres and you're going to put it into wildlife, because 3 out of these 7 boxes ain't hard on 100 acres. But 3 out of these 7 is pretty dang tough on 5 acres.
Absolutely. That's why you really need to think about your management plan and what your goals are and what species you're going to manage. Yeah.
Maybe typically a small acreage means a small species.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely, or especially grassland songbirds. In our area, grassland songbirds are important, really big. Lots of people, one of the things is supplemental shelter, bird boxes, bat boxes, duck boxes, things like that you can do. But back to erosion, pond construction or gully shape. If you've only got 6-7 acres and you got a gully on half of it and you go to try to do something, all of a sudden you don't have much land anymore.
That's right. It doesn't take long in order for a little wash crack to become a pretty large ditch.
Yes, sir. Some management that would fall under erosion would be stream sign pond and wetland revegetation. So if you've got ponds that are just not vegetated very well, you could plant some native grass or some
to hold the dirt in place on
the dirt
on the dams and the.
Yes, establishing native plants. A lot of people and it's kind of thing like it could fall under habitat management, but if your creek is erosion really badly and you've already got a check in the box for habitat management, you could actually put riparian buffers, which provides habitat, could be a check in the box there, but it also prevents erosion. So that could be or just fencing your cattle out of creeks, That
would be considered erosion control. Well, but that's not wildlife anymore either.
Yeah. Well, if you're managing for wildlife and your property is big enough, in order to really manage for wildlife really good, you've got a lot of native range, it needs to be grazed.
Absolutely. That would go right with shredding and burning and all that.
Yes, and if you're going to use cattle to do it, well, a good idea would just be keep them out of the riparian areas, especially in the wintertime or something like that. Have some type of goal some type of stuff in your management plan that you can show that you're doing. Dike and levee construction or management, water diversion, terraces, things like that. People are trying to stop erosion. Us farmers in the Blackland Prairie, we've dealt with it all for years,
Absolutely.
With the terraces.
Yes, and so all that counts towards a check in the box for your erosion management.
Yes.
And then I guess while we're on that topic, though, that's pretty close to supplemental water. You know, you mentioned pond construction. So depending on, I guess, the type of water that your wildlife is that you're managing for, or whatever, you know, their requirements are for this area, like if it's ducks,
yes,
I mean, that's going to be a total different supplemental water requirement than if you're managing for birds.
Lizards, yeah.
Or lizards or something like that. It's totally different.
Sure. So, I mean, you could provide supplemental water. One farm would be making marshes or wetland, either developing them or restoring them. So, if you've got some bad areas or a little depression that's just been in pasture, you could actually dig it out a little bit more, restore it, plant some cattails, make a little small wetland. You know, that'd be one good thing for ducks, you know. Just managing, like we discussed in one of the topics, I think, limiting factors where we managed our wildlife troughs and stuff like that. Just having a wildlife like a cattle watering trough that you put dirt up to or rocks up to it, so that a mammal can get, or a small mammal or a small reptile can get in there and get a drink of water, or if a squirrel or a frog falls in, it can hop on something and get out of there without drowning.
All that counts.
Maintaining that stuff counts. Or just like we said, letting your windmill or water trough just run over a little bit to create a little wetland. Just maintain that every year, and that counts. Something as simple as that. You know, or like, I don't have one in my property, but before I die, I want a wildlife watering feature in my yard. Like I like feeding
I bet
birds.
that's fun to sit by and watch.
I've got buddies that put them on their ranches in South Texas, you know, and it is unbelievable to sit there and just watch the birds that come to that little.
Well, especially as water is so scarce. In an area where water is scarce, you might not get quite the stuff here that you get down there.
You'd be surprised, you know. I have perennial creek on, you know, my property, and it's, you know, but I can put water out there in the bird bath, and they use the daylights out of it. And I'm like, why don't you just go to the creek? You
Isn't
know?
that
But
something?
I don't know. I guess it's the way I mean, I've got a dog that's lazy, and that poor old girl, I got to keep water out for her, but all she's got to do is walk 100 yards. But
She could get a drink out of the creek.
she could, but I tell you, if you fill her water bucket, she'll run over there like she hadn't had water in years and just drink, you know?
So, but, you know, you talk about the supplemental water, James, and you've already mentioned building a pond in 2 of these already. That's a 10-year check in the box.
Yes, yeah. When you build a pond,
which it should be. That's major.
Yeah, that's a major. You don't have to do that one again for 10 years.
For 10 years, you get it. There's other things here, too, that work for that 10-year check in the box, too. And like building a levee or things for the erosion control
like usually
kind of stuff.
if you're moving large dirt, y'all, something like that usually lasts for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you may, but of course, by the time 10 years have rolled by, if it's a levee or something, it's probably going to be time to reshape it or something like that. It doesn't take long for that to wear out.
Yeah, I mean, so then you're just maintaining. So like I said, a lot of this stuff landowners are doing on their property anyway, you know, and so you just tweak it for your wildlife, how it works.
Mm-hmm. And so is there anything else on that providing supplemental water?
You know, I mean, you could put guzzlers out there. A lot of people will put, you know, build wildlife guzzlers, which are, you know, basically you're just catching like off your roof, you know, and put a guzzler to water, or, you know, there's all kinds of different ways to provide supplemental water for wildlife in a very minimal cost, you know, because what you want to do is you want water there ground level for critters. And, you know, a lot of people will build guzzlers and stuff like that and do that they can pipe off of existing structures to catch.
Makes sense there.
Yeah.
And so that brings us.
I guess dig a well, you know, that's probably a 10-year one too. You dig a well to provide access to a area of your property that doesn't have water.
Yeah, it benefits you in lots of ways.
Sure does.
And then you have things like predator management. So this is going to look different depending on what you're managing for, too.
Yes, and from what y'all need to understand, too, predator management, y'all, it's mostly native type stuff other than like fire ants, you know. A lot of people want to put feral hogs or exotics, you know, which they are a predator, no doubt about it, hogs are. But they technically are an exotic species, too, so controlling them, a lot of them, you know, it falls underneath your habitat management.
And again, I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but all of these things have to be native to your area that you're managing for. It can't be any exotic or any kind of wildlife like that you're writing your
like
plan for.
No, it can't be.
This has to be a species that native to your area.
Yes, native.
For you to get this wildlife exemption, you can't have it for, like Chancey said, wild hogs. You can't have a wildlife
management
for wild hogs because they're not native.
Yes.
And so it has to be a predator. So it's another check in the box.
Yeah.
The predator management. or predator control.
Yeah, say white
for
tail
whatever
deer.
it is I guess it could be cats if it's your birds, huh?
Absolutely.
Like feral cats
Feral,
or
yeah. Well, it's mostly native. Feral cats are probably considered an exotic animal that could go. There's some gray
even
areas.
the predators have to be natural predators,
Well,
like
for the
native
most
predators.
part, when we think of other than fire ants, like I said, there's some gray areas in there. But most time when you think of predator control, white-tailed deer guy, you're thinking about coyotes. You know, if you're a quail turkey guy, you're thinking about skunks and possums and coons. You know, nest predators. Nest predators are real, which hogs are definitely one of them too. Hogs are one of those things you need to be controlling them every month, guys.
You could I mean, they're an erosion. That's erosion control.
Yeah.
If you kill a hog, that's habitat control. I mean,
that's exotic species control.
You're going to check in a box for lots of things there. As many different ways they affect an ecosystem.
I don't think that you can literally y'all get that, but you really can. Like I actually do keep track of how many hogs I trap and kill every year, and how many of them are sows, and how many of them are boars, and I turn that in every year.
That's part of your management plan.
Part of look, last year I did, I forget what it was, a bunch of them last year. I can't remember. But this year was only 30. Only got 30 this year. But I keep track of every one, and that's just turn in. But another thing out of predator control, so like we said, nest predators are big. If birds are in your goals, you can think about
Texas rat snake.
Yeah, they could definitely be. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could see how that could definitely be. So long as it says it fits in your goals in your wildlife management plan, they kind of have to sync. Fire ant control, that's a big one. God knows it's hard to kill fire ants now, but there's methods to go do broadcast, applications on fields.
Yes, there's different ant baits you could put out there.
Yeah, brown-headed cowbird control, y'all. And if you don't know, brown-headed cowbirds, they're the little black birds that you see like crazy all with the cattle. They have the little brown heads. They're nest parasites. They get in songbird nests and they lay their egg in there, and
then the songbird raises their babies.
Yeah, and generally the cowbirds, it hatches 2 or 3 days before the thing. So it usually gets bigger and outgrows them and pushes the other ones out. And they're just a mess. They really are. You can manage and trap them. I think per county there's like a specific number you need to kill every year to qualify. So like we talk about minimum requirements for acreage, there's also some minimum requirements for some of these, like how many you need to kill, or if you're going to put up nest boxes for shelter, how many nest boxes to put out. So depending on your county and your appraisal district, and the appraisal review board, that might tweak the percentages from year to year or from county to county, but the practices don't.
That's a neat story about that little species.
Oh, man, they're amazing. They really are. And you know what's crazy about, there's a bunch of studies that says, the closer, the more edge you have. So, if you imagine for a deer and the closer you are with wood lines, you have more brown-headed cowbirds. And I've talked.
Are they common?
What's that? Oh, in the springtime, crazy common. They're everywhere. I can't tell you how many I shoot every spring.
Do they even have their own nest or not?
No, they rob them.
They don't have a nest at all.
No.
They lay their eggs in another nest, and then the birds who the nest that was, they basically sit on the eggs and raise them up.
They're what's called a nest parasite. They're really amazing to think about. I tell you, they're a sorry little bird, because I found one time in a white-eyed vireo's nest. And, I don't know. It might have been a Bell's.
You found the little chicken there?
I found the cowbird egg. You can tell it's a very different egg, very shaped, bigger and everything. And I took that. It had the vireo nest in there. This was in South Texas, y'all. And I saw the cowbird egg, and I was like, man. So I just, trying to think I was helping, I took the egg and I threw it away. Well, those female cowbirds checked, because the next day I went back to look. She had destroyed that nest to make that bird build another one.
You were joking me.
No, destroyed the nest and killed all and then hence destroyed the eggs too.
Those birds are
well, they
brutal,
say
man.
Historically they thought was because they followed the bison. So they never had time to build a nest because they were always
moving.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing. And it wasn't a problem historically because they were always finding the bison. But now we've got cattle that never leave. And now we got these songbirds coming in, these grassland songbirds. Not only is their habitat getting taken from them, a lot of the babies that they're trying to raise are getting killed or outcompeted by brown-headed cowbirds.
They just grow faster and outcompete those little young birds.
Yeah, I mean, you can Google search brown-headed cowbird. Texas Parks and Wildlife has a tremendous amount of information about them. And it's just interesting, and it's something that's you wouldn't think. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's amazing. I don't know exactly, y'all, so don't quote me on it. But something like taking out one female cowbird saves you 25 songbirds.
Wow.
Something like that. It's significant. It really is. What kind of impact that they have on our little native migratory songbirds.
So that's a predator that you could be managing in order to get your check in the box if you're managing for songbirds.
Especially if you got cattle too, you know. If you got cattle that you
Why do they follow the bison and the cattle?
Because they're the blackbirds
they're walking
that
beside
eating
the insects that the cows as the cows graze, they stir the bugs up, and these birds sit there and catch the grasshoppers and different things that the cattle are spooking.
They're not cattle egrets, not the white ones, y'all. They're protected, you know, and so are brown-headed cowbirds too.
Oh, they're protected too.
Every bird in Texas that's native is protected.
So how would you even manage that predator?
Well, you can if they're these species like grackle and starling control. Starlings are technically not native, but grackles are, you know. But you know, depending, they can be big ones. So depending, the state has the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is one, you know, that protects everything. But certain species are what's considered nuisances, like crows, you know. But technically, you can't just go out there and kill a crow because you just don't like crows. That's against the law because they're protected, you know. Maybe not under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, but they're protected. But, you know, you ask anybody, well, you can kill them if they're fixing to depredate. And if you know crows and you're a pecan farmer, it's always fixing to depredate.
That's true.
So
yes, you hear the crow guns going off all the time, you know, in the fall whenever the pecans are starting to take shape and stuff, going off to scare all the crows away.
Yeah.
That's
like a little off topic, y'all.
Sounds like a little war zone out where we live out there in the pecan fields.
Yeah.
But so what are some other examples of this predator management?
Those are the big ones I can think of, you know, that most of the ones like on the checkbox, I think it's those right there. Predator control. The main ones is coons. Set your DPs out there. Your DP traps, y'all, like we talked about, around your supplemental feeder. You just knocked off 2 of your list right there. You just did predator control and supplemental feed. Fire ant control is a big one just because they're a problem for so many things. Brown-headed cowbird, those are the main ones. But I guess other ones could be species-specific. But those are the main ones that they're looking at.
And so when you fill this form out and you check the box for predator management, you have to write a paragraph as to what you did?
Yes, and that's why it's good to have pictures and species and sexes, you know, what you did. Like I said, they make big traps for cattle people. It's called a cowbird trap. Or you can even build smaller cowbird traps. But like I said, some people will just shoot them, you know, at bird feeders because they'll go to bird feeders too. But I think it's one of those things you need to be showing that you're making a difference or trying to make a difference for your management plan.
Makes sense. And so I guess the last one of the 7 practices that you could do, we mentioned it earlier, is supplemental feeding.
Yeah, supplemental feeding.
Not hard for birds.
I
mean, you know, a lot of people feed different bird seeds or plant. This is where you could plant your sunflowers or plant food plots for your for any of them basically.
Manage tame pasture. You know that go and interseed. You know, coastal field with oats in the fall. You know that's something. Or ryegrass.
That's good for
cereal
deer.
Rye. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And
or providing the pelleted feed, but it's got to be 16%.
That's hard for me to believe. It has to be 16%, and then you have to keep your receipts to show that you did that, because there's not going to be many other ways that you could prove that you did that.
No, there really isn't. There sure isn't. You know, or like a lot of people buy that stuff in bulk, you know, or whatever. I don't know if y'all, like y'all's feed store, if y'all keep up with people that buy it that way, you know. But, yeah, keep your receipts the main thing.
I probably shouldn't tell this story, but we'll have people come in every once in a while, and they'll be like, hey, old Steve told me to get a copy of his receipt from his deer feed because I need that for my wildlife management plan.
No, that doesn't happen.
No.
But I guess so. But real quick, there's 2 left: shelter and census, right? Providing shelter. Did we already do all that? No. So shelter would be when I'm moving off from.
Oh no, we did not talk about that one.
Shelter. That's nest boxes, y'all. You know, bluebirds are a big deal. Carolina chickadee, any of your cavity nesting birds, titmice, things like that.
It could be leaving like a brush pile out. Instead of burning a brush pile right away.
Yeah.
Good place for different things to hide.
Yes. Think about for cottontail rabbits, you know, things like that. Managing hay meadow, pasture cropland. Half cutting trees, y'all. So half cutting means basically, say you got maybe a lot of cedar trees out there. Or not cedar. Well, it could be cedar, but most of the time we're not talking about cedar. We're talking about like mesquite or something like that. You go in there and you cut the top half off of them. Not all the way through, but then just let it fall on the ground where it's still got cambium tissue attached, so it falls on the ground and continues to grow. You just create a cover for small mammals, just like that, and cover for birds to get in. Birds love brush piles and things like that. That's one way. Establishing wooded plants and shrubs, like you talked about, do the fence line. You want to let the birds plant your stuff, or just go buy some stuff or hand dig it on your property and transplant them, move them where you want them.
And I guess there's houses you could buy possibly for some of these migrating birds and different things
Sure,
too, or
there's
does this
duck
have to be
boxes.
natural?
No, you could buy houses, bat boxes, duck boxes. A lot of people make bluebird boxes, owl boxes, screech owl boxes.
Why are they different, Chancey? How is there different nesting boxes for all these different birds?
Well, the biology of the species, for one. How big is the bird? So like your bluebird boxes, a lot of times you get Carolina chickadees in there, and you get titmice, I guess, could theoretically use it. But the holes are a certain size. You want to keep that hole. So a bluebird, technically, only something that big can get in there. And then a lot of times you have predator guards on your bird box. But then, think of your screech owls. There's specific holes that they like. Sometimes they like their hole to be on the east side or the west side. Or a lot of these animals are very specific in the homes that they choose. And bats, they have a specific box, And wood ducks have a specific box. And it's cool, like in our area, because we have two different kinds of wood ducks here. We have the wood ducks that migrate, and then we have the wood ducks that stay here year-round. So if you got wood ducks on your property, I do it on mine, put some wood duck boxes out, because they're just cool, Wood ducks are cool, and if you can get them to breed on your property and stay, that's great. You can also develop natural cavities and snags. So that's what, say you got a bunch of bottomland, or just a bunch of woodland area, you can go in there and do what's called a hack squirt method, or just girdle some trees, create some snags, not on your best beautiful trees, but on trees you don't care too much about. Kill them, let them stand, because that provides excellent habitat. Woodpeckers will eventually go in there, excavate holes, and then those other birds, like your cavity nesters, are going to go in there and utilize them. Let that snag maintain it. Keep it standing as long as you can. That's another way of providing supplemental shelter.
Huh, that's pretty interesting,
too.
As
long as you maintain like 5 snags per acre, implement and maintain 5 per acre, check off the box.
I'll be dang.
Which that's an easy one to do. It really is. And you can do that in 30 minutes. Especially with the hack and squirt method, you could create them real fast.
What do you mean by hack and squirt?
Hack and squirt is like a method that you use in the eastern United States forest. Like you could use a little hatchet and you go around about breast height of a tree. And like I said, not on your good trees, kind of your shade tolerant stuff,
fast growing, soft
fast growing,
trees,
yeah,
maybe.
something that's gonna, the birds are gonna get after. And if you got a bunch of them, the bigger kind of the better from a habitat standpoint for cavity nesters. And you can just, number one, you could girdle it with a chainsaw or a knife. It's going to take a while to die. With a hack and squirt, you basically take a hatchet and you just cut into it just a little bit. Depending on how big a tree, you might have to do it 1 to 3 times. And then you take a spray mixture. I forget what the mixture of, like Garlon with water, and spray down in there, and it will eventually kill it.
Kind of like a remedy, kind of.
Yeah, Garlon.
Or something.
Yeah, it's the same triclopyr. It's a remedy base. Some people call it Garlon. I think it's the surfactant that's really different.
Okay.
I'm not positive on that, but I know Garlon is one of them they use, and there's some other chemicals, but I think they're all triclopyr based.
And so that'll get you a check in the box.
Yeah, and like I said, and I think as far as specific to cover, I think there are some that Parks and Wildlife did put out for the post oak savanna and blackland prairie, specifically for cover requirements.
Like these things right here.
Minimum. So like in this, now I'm not saying every county that does it, but this is Parks and Wildlife's recommendation. So say you got nest box out there for eastern bluebird, tufted titmouse, wrens, the Buick's wren, and the Carolina chickadee. And they should be 1 nest box per 3 acres of suitable habitat.
So there's regulations on this.
On something, especially with nest boxes, because that's something, a lot of people will do. And then because if you got nest boxes out there, you need to be maintaining them. You need to make sure they got the wasp nest out of them before the nesting season. And technically, a lot of people will do nest boxes and census at the same time and get 2 boxes off, because you can go in there and document who's using your nest box, which species is using, how many eggs they had, and how many clutches they had per year. That's vital, very important information to non-game biologists.
And, mentioning
that's a census right there. So you just
mentioning
did 2
that's
things.
our last part.
Yeah.
That's our last check in the box, the census, right?
Yeah, census would be our last check in the box, out of the 7.
And so we've already mentioned this, too, with the browse surveys and different ways Chancey's mentioned before about doing counts on your deer and different things. But now he's mentioning that, too, where you could do egg counts for these birds.
Or like winter bird surveys or breeding bird surveys, which is like in the springtime when the birds start breeding and start calling. You know, go out there and listen, do what's called point counts. You know, and there's lots of ways to get census. You know, so we just named 3 of them. But then if you're a deer guy, spotlight counts, and most of the time they want a minimum of 3 spotlight.
You take the average of your 3.
Yeah, or like for the minimum, like you can't just do 1. It either, or if you do 1, it has to be 15 miles long. That's a big place.
Oh,
that's
wow.
a big place.
15 miles.
Yeah, but most everybody that does spotlight counts, you need 3 of them anyway, because sometimes you have a bad night. Sometimes you have a good night.
Absolutely.
So if you got a small place, but it's still big enough for deer, just do 3 of them, you know. Say your spotlight line's 3-4 miles, you know. Do 3 of them, something like that. That'll qualify, turn it in. Most time, if you're on MLDP permits for deer, you're already doing something like that. You've already got that information. Like I said, if you're already actively managing, you're probably already doing most of these. Harvest data collection and record keeper, that's one of them. Harvest record keeping, like that's collecting age, weight, and antler data from your deer herd. Age, weight, and antler data.
That'll tell you if you're overpopulated or not.
Yeah, because generally age, weight, and antler data. And
if you got weak animals, there's probably too much competition out there.
Yeah, if they were lactating. Remember when we talked about nutrition? Lactation is a key indicator of herd health. If you're harvesting a lot of does in the fall and they're not lactating or didn't have milk, that means they didn't have a fall or something happened to it. And so fawns, having healthy fawns mean your mama should be lactating. So, you know, that's a key indicator of your herd health.
And how many animals you have out there.
Yeah, because generally nutrition, herd health goes down with habitat decreases. So if habitat goes down, you know, quality of habitat goes down, generally herd health follows it. And like I said, we always talk about carrying capacity, but you're really never at carrying capacity. You're either above it or below it. You're either slightly above it or slightly below it, you know, and that's the balance. We're just back and forth, trying to keep it within that carrying capacity that can change from year to year.
Kind of sounds like my blood sugar.
Yeah.
I got diabetes. It's always either too low or too high. It's tough to keep it right there in the right spot.
Yeah, it really is. The same thing.
The same thing. Yeah, same thing.
What we do. Yeah.
Really. So what's another way, Chancey? Aerial counts? Like,
yeah, if you
people probably doing that with their drones now and all. Or
well, it's main thing they're talking about, like if you're in South Texas, you know, they're
with a
flying
helicopter.
with a helicopter, counting deer with a helicopter. But you're in West Texas, you know, they'll do it with fixed wing aircraft or something. Census monitoring endangered species, threatened wildlife. You know, people that had threatened species could do, you know, specific. Like I said, these are all things just that you could use. But most of the time, you know, people are using point counts for birds or winter bird surveys or doing spotlight counts or camera counts for deer. Camera counts work as well as long as you follow the protocol to do it.
And so let's see here. That brings us up to pretty much the summer.
Sum it up,
Okay,
yeah.
so once again, in order for you to when you turn your report in every year, you got to have 3 of those 7 boxes that we just talked about checked.
Yes, yeah. But to get to there, just to summarize everything, you got to be doing those, like Bradley just said, at least 3 out of 7. But to get to there, to go to wildlife, the property must have been qualified as 1D1 open space ag use land the year prior to changing to wildlife management. So, like we talked about, if you have it, don't lose it. Always keep it. Also, the land must be used to support a sustaining, breeding, migrating, or wintering population of native wild animals. Native. They got to be native. You got to submit to the appraisal district between January 1st and April 30th, you know, of that year that you want to change. And likewise, if you want to change back, same time framing. Another thing, summarize up, you got to have a wildlife management plan. You got to have that one. It's best to submit that management plan the same time you submit for the land use change. And then also, of course, if the property has been reduced in size since the previous tax year, there is a minimum tract size requirements that must be met to qualify for wildlife.
And that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, that's the big topics. And like I said, y'all, we could and there's a lot of tax code and tax documents, and I'm no lawyer or property tax consultant, but a lot of that stuff I got off of Dr. Kathy. Kudos to Dr. Kathy, my old boss again. I think he put a publication out together, him and some other guys, on property tax stuff. So a lot of that stuff, y'all, I'm telling you, is coming from A&M and also just from my experience when I used to write them and do them all the time with Parks and Wildlife.
And once again, he could sure help you write those plans and keep up with what you're supposed to be doing in this ever-changing world of tax appraisals and things that's going on.
Yes.
But I guess that sums up this week, Chancey.
Yes, that covers wildlife, the brushing on wildlife appraisal for sure. So,
and I hope you join us next week. We'll do a little discussion next week about different hay grazer varieties and stuff that are coming out right now, and getting time to book that. Almost time to plant that if it warms up and dries up here a little bit. So we'll discuss a little bit about that next week, but I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I guess me and Chancey will talk to y'all next week.
Y'all have a great week, y'all.